This is a very, very important day. It actually it marks the significance of women's struggle and for women's participation, starting over 100 years ago. So it's very, very significant. It's very, very important. It's an important time in the sense that it's an opportunity for us to take stock since we started this struggle for women emancipation. Where have we gone? How much have we achieved? What do we need to do to move forward? So it's always good that every year we have an opportunity to take stock. And it's good that the UN have decided that every year they come up with a theme. And the theme is usually related to some goals that have been set. The many goals that have been set for ensuring women's emancipation, women's participation in all aspects of life, in decision making, in not only that in decision making, but also in being part of implementation of those decisions. So that is why it's a very significant day. It's also an opportunity for solidarity for women worldwide, because that day, all around the world, you will find women are celebrating. At whatever level they are, you find women at grassroots celebrating it. You find women at the highest elitist women celebrating it. So everybody joins in. There are no barriers. There are no divides as far as the women are concerned on that day. So that is why I think it's a significant day. It's a day we should continue to celebrate in order for us to take stock and to reflect and to chart a way forward as to what needs to be done next to achieve equity and equality.
Right. This year's theme calls on women leaders to take action and challenge the social bias and inequalities women continue to face. As the first female defense minister in the country, what are some of the challenges you face by the virtue of being a woman in this position, and how did you overcome them?
I came to this ministry at a very crucial time. I'm here by the virtue of the agreement, an agreement that has ended war. And we are faced with the challenge of implementing that agreement. It comes with its own challenges. We are required by the agreement to actually form and establish a national army, unified all the forces to ensure that this new force, not only for the army but for the whole security sector, must be a force that reflects the diversity of the country. When you talk about diversity, it means with regards to gender, with regards to ethnicity, with regards to even education and so on. That's a challenge. You are aware that we have not been able to graduate the first unified forces. They're still in training centers. They've been in training centers for the last year and a bit. It's a big challenge. To me, whether you're a woman or you're a male, is a challenge that really is requires a lot of determination, because that would be the basis of sustaining peace in our country. In fact, that is the basis, and that is without that implementation of the transitional security arrangement, you would have no peace, basically, and so on. So that's one challenge. Of course, being a woman, it can be positive in some aspects, but it can be also it can have a negative impact by way of challenge. I can say within the ministry, I think many people received with caution that, we're having a woman minister. From within my own party that nominated me to be the minister, we faced a lot of challenges. People even decided to defect because they don't want a minister of defense to be a woman. This is as far as people are, resentful of women leadership in this security sector and so on. But I think within the institution itself and so on, I think there were initially apprehension and so on, especially that I come from a background that I am not a military person. I'm not a soldier. I've never been a soldier. So that makes it, this is the first time for them to have also a Minister of Defense, a civilian Minister of Defense, at the same time a woman. So there were a bit of apprehension to begin with. But I think finally now we are all relaxed. We're just dealing with the challenges that this ministry have been facing from day one. Issues that have been there that we are trying to actually address. And these issues had a lot to do with the different roles and functions, the whole structure, the whole setup, the legacy that came with the struggle, the liberation struggle, which means basically what I'm talking about is the transformation of this armed force into a formidable conventional armed force that is fit to, to actually play a role, not only in the country, but regionally and internationally. So those are the challenges. I'm not sure whether I can say it's because I'm a woman that I face some of these challenges. I don't think I at this stage I can say that. I can only say that maybe I face a challenge. These are challenges that comes with the circumstances that are here at this particular time. This is how I take the challenges. I refuse to allow myself to think like, okay, I'm having these challenges because I'm a woman. I rather take them as challenges that I need to address, regardless. So.
Right. Yes. Let me go a bit personal. You mentioned that there were challenges that you face. There were so many criticism that she's appointed because she's the wife of the first vice president, and also being from a civilian background, you've never been a military personnel. How did you react to them?
Personally, I'm confident that I know what I'm doing. And the party is confident that I have what it takes. That's why they decided to appoint me to that position. So I'm aware that always there would be opposition for a number of reasons. Some are competitors who really wanted to be part of or to fill the position. Definitely, those people would complain. Others, people are calculating for whatever reason. People who don't even know personally what I can do. In this, let me say, in the struggle, in the movement, the SPLM-IO, I have been contributing and delivering, and nobody ever complained that since you are actually the wife of our chairman, you should not be contributing and you should not be participating. People were very happy when it was just we were struggling. I have been part of this peace talk from day one, from 2014. I have been leading the security committee of IO in the peace talk. I also was leading the security committee of the party. People did not object to it because they knew that I could negotiate on their behalf a security arrangement deal that would address the issues that we felt needed to be addressed. So this is one. So I'm not very much concerned about that, because I'm only concerned about actually delivering. I have been appointed. I have a mandate. This mandate comes from the agreement, parts of the mandates from the constitutions, and I'm here to fulfill that. I am not going to be derailed by people who believe that, simply because you are a woman or you are somebody's wife, you should not participate. There's nothing like that in our constitution. There's nothing like that in the agreement. So that is how I take those kinds of challenges. So I don't allow them to kind of get in the way and so on. As for the other issue of being a civilian, you see, is in our constitution that the organized forces, the army especially, it says one of our principles and doctrine is subordination to civil authority. So basically, the army carries out political decisions decided by political leadership. Political leadership is the strategic level. The army becomes the implementer. The army only follows what comes from the political leadership. The political leadership is a civil leadership. We are also, so when people say you're the first civilian to lead this ministry and that it should be an issue, in fact, the normal thing is that this institution is led by civil authority. Even if somebody had a background of military, once they become into this position, they're no longer military. They're now retired. If you followed in the US law says if you've been in the military, to be appointed as Secretary of State for Defense, you must have retired for 7 years. So you must have been out of the army for 7 years before you become Secretary of Defense. This is basically to ensure subordination to civil authority. And this is what keeps the army in check. This is what keeps the army under control, to ensure that they are only following decisions that come from the public through the parliament. This decision comes through the parliament, and then they are implemented by the executive, which in this case is the ministry.
Okay. There have also been reports of challenges facing women in the military, in the cantonment centers, and how are these issues being addressed?
These are very daunting challenges, and it really is a very, very difficult situation. In the cantonment centers, it's not only the women, but the women, of course, becomes a special case because of the special needs. We have women in cantonment centers, training centers, and cantonment areas. I don't even want to talk about cantonment, because cantonment have been abandoned because of food. Maybe people will only come back once food logistics is provided. We have been trying as security mechanism. We put all the needs, and some of the needs that we put is actually what we call special dignity kits for women that were supposed to go as part of the logistics that is going. But because of the challenges that we are having in accessing resources, the situation has become so dire for the women. So now what we are pushing for basically is to make sure that this force is graduated. They are now already fatigued. Some women went there, they had their babies. Some of them went pregnant. And we want to ensure that, these women, even if you were pregnant, it shouldn't be held against you and that you're, because initially there were people who were trying to send women who were pregnant to DDR and lactating mothers to DDR. So we said this is not an illness for you to send somebody, or it's not a disability for you to send somebody to DDR simply because they are lactating or they are giving birth. That is not right. So now that issue, we have settled it. So the women will definitely be graduated together with the forces. All that is needed is that if somebody is lactating, they get the normal maternity leave that the law allows for them to look after their baby until that time is over. Then they come back to the training center, and then they're graduated with their colleagues. So the challenges in the training centers for women is a matter of concern. We try every now and then, whenever we get little resources here and there, we try to send some little things here and there, soaps, some dignity kits, and so on. But it's not enough. It's not enough. That's why the force needs to be graduated.
And when is the graduation going to take place?
The JDB has already set a timetable, but this would not be the first time for them to set a timetable. Timetable is always set, but because for some reason, it doesn't go through. The issue of the resources and that. Now we're pushing that this graduation must happen before the end of March. Really, before the end of March, we need to see these people graduated. There's the challenge of deployment, the challenge of logistics to deploy those forces. This is also another challenge. As soon as the graduation is done, we also need to now bring people from cantonment, the next batch, for training. This is also a challenge for us to have access to resources. So these are the challenges that we are facing.
Right. How is your office ensuring that women in the military do not experience injustice and certain biasness in their line of work?
Right now, I've been involved and engaged even before I became Minister of Defense. In the IO, I was the vocal point for protection of women and prevention of gender-based violence and sexual violence against women within the forces and in conflict areas. And this program is supported by the UN Protection Unit. Now in the ministry, what we have done is that we put together a plan of action, because there was a plan of action in the IO, and the plan of action of the SSPDF, and this is basically around protection of women, and this will involve a lot of stuff, training the armed forces on these issues, training the women themselves on their rights, training the command on command responsibility, ensuring that women are looked after, and so on and so forth. So now in the ministry here, we have one joint action plan. This is for all the forces now, because we have merged the action plan, and this will be now under the JDB, because the JDB is responsible for command and control of all the forces. We also have a gender vocal point that has been appointed. We have requested this from the UN to support us, so they're supporting us with one staff. The lady you just saw me meet with, she's actually the gender vocal point in supporting the action plan and ensuring that this action plan is implemented, and so on and so forth. So, but in the longer run, this will be part of now the bigger transformation process. You see, you will only change the situation of women by ensuring that women have access to education. And this is one thing that we definitely would want to do within the armed forces, to ensure that there is access to education, not only training and capacity building, but education. When I talk about education, I mean, going through the literacy program. Because one of the disadvantages that we have is basically women in the organized forces uh, uh, as, as a reflection of the level of literacy of women in the country is also reflected in the organized forces. We will definitely encourage, as part of the SDSR white paper that will come out, there will be a special encouragement for women and women, educated women and university graduates to actually join the forces. This is the only time we'll be able to fulfill the 35% affirmative action. As it is now, we cannot fulfill it. You may be able to do it at the leadership level politically, but at the leadership level in the army, for example, it becomes difficult because people have to come through a certain hierarchy. You need to kind of professionalize the whole force. You make sure that they have access to education. You also bring in new blood that is educated, and this is the only time we will be able to actually ensure that there is some kind of equity in the organized forces. So it's more or less a longer term program. In the shorter term, the few women we have, we definitely have to focus on them, focus on ensuring that we give them the necessary capacity so that they are able to be deployed in key areas and so on.
What is your message to South Sudanese women and girls as they prepare to mark the International Women's Day?
I first want to say congratulations that you have reached this far. Yes, we have a lot of challenges, but we also must recognize the milestones. We have now in the agreement, we have a 35% affirmative action, which is a step up from the 25%. Now, this 35 affirmative action is now already translated and is part of the Constitution, makes it part of the law of the land. That's a step up, and that's a milestone. These milestones, we also need to reflect now with the 25% affirmative action. Have we achieved? Because it's not just the numbers. It's also ensuring that these numbers are filled and are filled with the right people who can also make a difference. So now our focus should be looking at our women at the political level, at the leadership level. But we also need to support them to ensure that they also deliver wherever they have been assigned. Number two, we need to think of the next layer now. We need to really be, as women, whether you are in the civil society organization or you're in an institution like I'm in now, we need to really embark on developing the next layer of leaders. And this is very, very important. It's what would make a difference. But more importantly, it's lucky that the Minister of Education, General Education, is a lady. We really need to start remove the barriers for girls, the barriers that prevents girls to go to school, to be retained in school, to continue with their education. This is very important. This is something that we need to engage in very, very seriously, and we need to see ourselves 10 years from now. Are we going to be the same level as Kenya 10 years from now? Should we aim to be like, Rwanda? Rwanda has done very, very well. In the next 10 years, South Africa, in the next 10 years, we should even think as far as being like some of the European countries, 10 years. But if we don't consciously use this opportunity of the Women's Day to reflect, to focus, to think about our own priorities, to wherever we are, to work towards that progress, we must ask ourselves, how many girls have I supported? How many women have I empowered in your institution? What programs am I doing that would contribute to the women's emancipation, to the women's empowerment, to the women's participation in public life, and ensuring that that participation is effective and most importantly, changing livelihoods of families and so on. We have now the Minister of Agriculture, who is a woman. This is very important. This is a ministry that deals with improving livelihoods of our citizens. The people who are responsible for changing the livelihood of the citizen are basically women in their homes and so on. So this is my message to my sisters. As we celebrate, let us reflect individually and collectively what are the next steps.
Right. Now, first, briefly tell me who you are, your education background and political background. This on another day.
I thought you knew me by now.
For the public.
Well, my education, some of us have been lucky, and a lot of women are not as lucky as some of us are. I grew up in a family where my father started off as a teacher and became a politician. So he's a man who understood the meaning of education. My mom also is somebody who went to school. So I come from a family where the meaning of education is understood. Education in my family goes as far as my grandparents. So that is an advantage. So because of that, I went to school. I was able to go to school, did not have to struggle like many of my peers and so on. So I finished primary, I finished middle school. I went to middle school here in Juba. I went to high school in Kosti. I did my university in the UK. So in fact, some people sometimes wonder what have I studied, but what I've studied at the university level, I actually started off studying biochemistry, and then for some reasons I decided to shift to human nutrition. Both were in the same school of life sciences and so on. So and then I went on to do public health and epidemiology. So then from there I dropped the whole of that, and I went on to do something on human rights, focusing on gender and African women and so on. So these are some of the things that I followed and so on. Got introduced to the security sector. I've done a lot of what you call advocacy work. Was campaigning for Oil for Peace in England. Participated in creating that oil coalition for South Sudan and what have you and what not. So, but got introduced to the security sector because through DDR. So I worked from 2004, through DDR. And from there on, here I am today.
Right. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to speak to you. Do have a wonderful evening and have a blessed weekend ahead.